waiting for you in your office.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Would you cancel my 2 o'clock? This next meeting could run a little bit deadly.
You ever notice how some animated villains are about as threatening as a wet paper bag, while others make you want to sleep with the lights on? Sony Animation's got the full spectrum, and we're about to dive into all of them. From bumbling baddies to nightmare fuel, we're ranking every Sony Animation villain. Ever wonder what it would be like if these cartoon crooks had a villain convention? Who'd be running the show, and who'd be stuck manning the punch bowl? Let's find out as we break down these animated antagonists. By the end of this, you might just find yourself switching sides. Alright, let's talk about Kingpin. This dude's not your average bad guy. He's got more going on than just being a big, scary mob boss. In Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, we get to see a whole new side of him. Now, I know what you're thinking, but he's just a giant rectangle with a tiny head. And yeah, you're not wrong. His design is pretty out there. The animators made him look both ridiculous and terrifying, like a walking skyscraper with fists. When Kingpin's on screen, you can't help but stare. He's like a black hole of villainy, sucking in all your attention. But here's where it gets interesting. Kingpin's got this whole backstory about trying to bring back his dead family. I mean, who can't relate to wanting to see their loved ones again? The problem is, he's cool with destroying multiple universes to make it happen. His massive frame mirrors the enormity of his grief and the extremes he'll go to. That's what makes Kingpin such a great villain. He's got real motivations, real pain driving him. You understand why he's doing what he's doing, even if you don't agree with it. He's not just twirling his mustache and laughing maniacally, though I bet he'd look hilarious with a mustache. I will place Kingpin in S tier, and the reason is, he's a wrecking ball of pure rage and muscle. He literally punches Spider-Man to death, like full-on smashes him into the ground, and all of this just because he's sad. Therapy exists, my guy. Now let's talk about the Spot. Remember when you thought polka dots were the coolest thing ever? Well, this guy took that idea and ran with it straight into villainy. Across the Spider-Verse introduced us to this walking Dalmatian of a bad guy, and boy, did he make an impression. The Spot starts off as a total joke, like that kid in school everyone laughed at. Picture him accidentally teleporting into walls like a bumbling magician, probably wishing he'd become an accountant instead. But then, plot twist! This goofy guy transforms into a serious threat. It's like watching the class clown suddenly become valedictorian, but with mind-blowing fight scenes that'll make your head spin. What's really interesting is how different he is from your typical brooding, deep-voiced villain. The Spot? He's a guy covered in polka dots who can make portals. It's ridiculous, and that's what makes him work. He catches you off guard. One minute you're laughing, the next he's actually kicking Spider-Man's butt. Fans are pretty divided on the Spot. Some love him, thinking he's the perfect mix of funny and threatening. Others think he's about as scary as a hole punch. But that's kind of the point. He's all about subverting our expectations. The Spot earns his place on our list by showing that sometimes the most unlikely villains can become the most dangerous. He's like the underdog of bad guys. And who doesn't love a good underdog story? Even if that underdog is trying to, destroy the multiverse or whatever, I will place the Spot in A tier. And the reason is he went from being a joke to one of the most terrifying villains in the multiverse. At first, he's just a walking ink blot who's bad at robbing ATMs, and next thing you know, he's breaking reality like it's a hobby. That's a villain glow up if I've ever seen one. Let's click our way to a baddie who's built an empire brick by brick. What if I told you the scariest villain in the LEGO universe isn't a dragon or a pirate, but a guy in a business suit? That's right, we're talking about Lord Business from the LEGO movie. Now you might be wondering, isn't this supposed to be about Sony villains? Well, Sony had a hand in producing this blocky adventure, so he totally counts. Lord Business, aka President Business, is what happens when you give your uptight uncle unlimited power and a bunch of Lego pieces. He's all about rules and keeping everything in its place. Sounds dull, right? Think again. Will Ferrell voices this guy, bringing a manic energy that makes him both hilarious and kinda scary. Here's where it gets interesting. Lord Business is like a walking, talking commentary on creativity versus conformity. His master plan? Gluing all the Lego pieces in place so nothing ever changes. It's like he's built a fortress of plastic bricks to keep out imagination. The movie plays with this idea that he might just be an overprotective dad guarding his Lego collection. It's pretty meta when you think about it. One minute you're watching little plastic people, the next you're questioning your own relationship with rules and creativity. I will place Lord Business in C tier, and the reason is he's the ultimate micromanaging control freak. He literally wants to glue an entire Lego universe together just to keep things perfect. If he were a real CEO, he'd be charging us for breathing air. Speaking of villains with layers, let's talk about Dr. Olivia Octavius, the Doc Ock, who's about to shake up everything you know about Spider-Man's classic nemesis. When I first heard they were gender-swapping Doc Ock for Into the Spider-Verse, I was skeptical, but then I saw her in action, and wow, was I wrong. Dr. Olivia Octavius isn't just your average baddie with some extra arms. She's got the brains, the tech, and an attitude that could make even the Kingpin raise an eyebrow. What really sets her apart is how much fun she's having being bad. It's like she woke up one day and thought, you know what would be cool? Being a supervillain. And she's loving every minute of it. There's this scene where she's fighting in a forest, and it's like watching a deranged octopus swing through the trees. It's wild, wacky, and weirdly awesome. But don't let her playful demeanor fool you. Those mechanical arms of hers are no joke. They move like a symphony of metallic chaos, both mesmerizing and terrifying. The animators went all out, making those tentacles look like they have a mind of their own. It's cool and creepy at the same time, like watching a sci-fi horror movie where the monster cracks jokes while chasing you. And her personality? She's not just evil, she's snarky evil. The kind of villain who'd probably leave a bad Yelp review for the hero's secret hideout. Spider Cave, more like Spider Lame, 0 stars. It's this mix of brilliance, sass, and danger that makes her such a standout character. One minute she's making you laugh, the next she's reminding you why she's a force to be reckoned with. I will place Dr. Olivia Octavius in B tier, and the reason is she's the kind of scientist who would cackle while dismantling the laws of physics. She's smart, terrifying, and way too excited about multiversal destruction. The best part, nobody saw her twist reveal coming. Alright folks, let's talk about the Emoji Movie. I know, but stick with me here. It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion. You just can't look away. So who's the big bad in this digital disaster? Meet Smiler, the perpetually grinning emoji who's supposed to be our villain. She's the head honcho of the tech center, always beaming, always chipper. Sounds delightful, right? Well, not so fast. Turns out being happy 24/7 can drive you a little bonkers. The movie tries to make Smiler threatening, but it falls flat. Here's the kicker. Smiler's not really evil, she's just trying to keep her emoji world in order. The animators did their best, I'll give them that. When Smiler gets angry, that frozen smile of hers is pretty darn creepy. It's like a mask that can't come off, and it's genuinely unsettling. You see, Smiler's whole deal is that she wants to keep emojis doing their assigned jobs. No mixing it up, no breaking the mold. It's all about conformity in her world. Her big villain plot, she wants to delete Gene, our main character, because he's a malfunction who can make multiple expressions. It's like if your boss decided the office dress code was always be smiling and fired anyone who dared to frown. This is where the movie tries to tackle some bigger themes. It's all about individuality versus conformity, being yourself in a world that wants you to be just like everyone else. Smiler's just the embodiment of that pressure to be perfect all the time. Pretty heavy stuff for a movie about phone icons, huh? I will place Smiler in F tier, and the reason is her villainous plan is making sure emojis stay on schedule. She's not even an evil AI, she's just a Karen in emoji form. If villains were ranked by how much we wish they didn't exist, she'd be S tier. Alright, let's talk about Gargamel. You know, that bald wizard who's been chasing little blue people for longer than some of us have been alive. When the Smurfs jumped to the big screen, Gargamel came along for the ride. But did he get an upgrade? Well, kind of. In the movies, Gargamel is played by Hank Azaria, and boy does he go all out. Azaria's performance is so over the top, you half expect him to start chasing the camera crew instead of Smurfs. Now, I gotta give credit where it's due. The CGI version of Azrael, Gargamel's cat, is actually pretty cool. That feline has more personality than most of the humans in the movie. But here's the thing about movie Gargamel. He's just not that scary. This guy's been after Smurfs for years, right? You'd think by now he'd have come up with a plan better than run around and yell a lot. Instead, he's more like a minor inconvenience than a true threat. And that's the problem with Gargamel in these movies. He's supposed to be this big bad villain, but he comes across more like someone who's in way over his head. You almost feel bad for the guy. Almost. I will place Gargamel in D tier, and the reason is he's spent decades trying to catch tiny blue creatures and still fails every time. He's basically Wile E. Coyote, but with magic and worse hair. I respect the persistence, but bro, maybe try something else. Alright, let's talk about Chester V. Remember Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs? Well, the sequel gave us this guy who's like Steve Jobs and a cult leader rolled into one, with a side of food puns. Chester V is the big cheese at LiveCorp, basically Apple if they went all in on eating. On the surface, Chester V is all about inspirational speeches and flashy presentations. But underneath that tech guru glitz, he's cooking up something nasty. His grand plan, turn all that sentient food into processed food bars. Talk about a hostile takeover of the food chain. Will Forte voices Chester 5, bringing the crazy to 11. It's like he's channeling every overly caffeinated motivational speaker you've ever seen, but with an extra helping of evil. The animators gave him this weird noodle body that moves in ways that would make a contortionist jealous. Super strange, but it just works. Here's where it gets interesting. Chester V isn't just a wacky villain for laughs. He's a clever commentary on how we sometimes follow tech gurus without thinking. It's like the movie is saying, hey, maybe don't trust everything the guy in the turtleneck tells you. Pretty deep stuff for a flick about talking pickles, right? So where does Chester V rank on our villain list? I will place Chester V in B tier, and the reason is he's basically Steve Jobs if he were a Bond villain. He speaks in weird hand gestures, runs a shady tech empire, and talks so much it's honestly his biggest flaw. He's the kind of guy who would scam you into buying a smart blender. Alright, let's talk about White Death, the big bad Yakuza boss in Bullet Train. This guy's got everyone scared, like a looming shadow over the whole movie. We don't see him for most of the film, which builds up the tension nicely. When he finally shows up, it's Michael Shannon in full villain mode, and boy does he deliver. Shannon goes all out as White Death, chewing the scenery like it's made of bubblegum. There's this great moment where he growls, "I am the plague," and you can just feel the menace oozing off him. It's honestly pretty awesome to watch. Now here's where things get interesting. The movie's mostly live action, but there are these killer animated sequences showing White Death's backstory. It's like someone took a Yakuza film, mixed it with an anime, and sprinkled some Kill Bill on top. These scenes are violent, stylish, and honestly pretty darn cool. But White Death isn't just about looking scary. This guy's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. He's got plans within plans, manipulating people like they're puppets on strings. It's the kind of villainy that makes you go, damn, that's evil. But I kind of respect the hustle. What really sets White Death apart is that when he's on screen, you genuinely believe bad things are about to go down. He's not just talk, he's got the skills and the ruthlessness to back it up. It's refreshing to see a villain who actually lives up to the hype. I will place White Death in A tier, and the reason is he's an assassin warlord with a personal vendetta and an entire train full of killers. This man orchestrates a mastermind level revenge plot, all while looking like he stepped out of a John Wick crossover. If you ever get on the wrong train, pray it's not his. Alright, so Across the Spider-Verse decided to take things up a notch with Robo-Doc Ock. This isn't your average octopus villain. We're talking about a seriously upgraded baddie here. Picture this, an 8-armed tech titan with all the brains and sass of the original Doc Ock, plus a whole lot of superiority complex. That's Robo-Doc Ock, also known as Superior Ock, and trust me, this guy lives up to the superior part of his name. The animators really went all out with this design. It's like they looked at the original Doc Ock and thought, more arms and part machine? Absolutely. The result is a villain that's part man, part machine, and all octopus. Pretty wild, right? But Robo-Doc Ock isn't just about the cool design. This guy's got goals, plans, and an ego the size of Manhattan. He's not just some mindless robot out to cause chaos. No, he's got a method to his madness, which makes him all the more terrifying. There's this one scene where he's fighting Spider-Man, and it's honestly mind-blowing. Imagine a deadly dance performed by a sentient Swiss Army knife on steroids. It's scary, but also kind of beautiful in a weird, twisted way. I will place Robo-Doc Ock in B tier, and the reason is a regular Doc Ock is scary enough, but now she's part robot. Imagine an evil genius who doesn't even need sleep. At this point, Spider-Man just needs to move to a universe without evil scientists. Alright, so remember when we talked about villains trying to take down superheroes? Well, now we're looking at a movie where the big bad is trying to take down a donkey. Yeah, you heard that right. Welcome to The Star, where our villain is a grumpy grandma named Norma. Now, you might be thinking, a grandma? How scary can she be? Well, that's kind of the problem. Granny Norma is supposed to be this terrifying force trying to stop the birth of Jesus, but she's about as menacing as a cranky neighbor. Here's the deal. Granny Norma is King Herod's mom, and she's not about to let some prophecy mess up her son's rule. But instead of being all evil and threatening, she's just kind of there, bumbling around and causing mild inconvenience. You'd think in a movie about the nativity, they'd make the villain actually scary. But nope, Granny Norma is more like a character from a kid's cartoon. There's this scene where she's chasing the main characters on a cart, and it's played for laughs, because nothing says biblical epic like slapstick comedy, right? The weird thing is, in a movie full of talking animals, Granny Norma is somehow the most cartoonish character. It's like they forgot they were making a semi-serious movie about the birth of Jesus and decided to throw in a villain from a Saturday morning cartoon instead. I will place Granny Norma in E tier, and the reason is she's just an angry old lady with nothing better to do. She's about as threatening as a grandma who yells at cashiers for slow service. The only reason she's not F tier is because she's still scarier than Smiler. Alright, so we're talking about epic now. You know that movie with the tiny forest people? Yeah, that one. Let's meet Mandrake, the villain who's all about decay and destruction. He's like a walking embodiment of forest rot, complete with a shadowy design of sharp edges and darkness. Mandrake's motivation is about as deep as a puddle. He wants to make everything rot just because. It's like he decided destroying the forest would be a fun weekend activity. Real creative, right? And you'd think having Christoph Waltz voice him would be amazing, but it's like they told him to dial it way down. It's Waltz at 2% power, which is just sad. It's like hiring Gordon Ramsay to make you a sandwich and then telling him to only use plain white bread and a single slice of cheese. The movie tries to give Mandrake this tragic backstory with his son, but they handle it about as well as I handle my houseplants. They introduce it and then just forget about it. It's like they got distracted by something shiny mid-writing and never came back to finish. There's this big battle at the end where Mandrake's trying to spread decay through the forest. It should be epic, get it? But it just feels meh. It's about as exciting as watching paint dry if the paint was evil and had a vendetta against trees. Compared to other villains we've talked about, Mandrake is like the dollar store version of a bad guy. He's there, he's doing villainy things, but he's just not that interesting or memorable. I will place Mandrake in C tier, and the reason is he's literally the embodiment of decay and destruction. He actually has a solid villain plan, turn everything into a rotting wasteland. If he wasn't constantly losing to tiny leaf warriors, he'd be A tier. Alright, let's talk about Captain Smek from Home. This guy's the leader of the Boov, but he's about as threatening as a soggy marshmallow. Steve Martin voices Smek, which should be comedy gold, right? Well, sometimes it is. Other times, it's just ewed. Like, imagine if the Pink Panther suddenly decided to lead an alien invasion. Here's the thing about Smek. He's not evil, just incredibly self-centered and cowardly. But get this big purple marshmallow with legs managed to displace the entire human race. How? Certainly not through any kind of strategic brilliance. The animators had a blast with Smek's design. The Boov can change shape, and Smek takes full advantage of this. He changes color more often than a teenager changes their mind about their favorite band. It's pretty entertaining to watch, I'll give him that. But let's be real, Smek is more of a bumbling fool than a true villain. He's the kind of character you'd expect to see in a slapstick comedy, not leading an alien invasion. It's like if your high school principal suddenly got put in charge of conquering Earth. Despite being responsible for a massive alien invasion, Smek's just not scary. He's more likely to run away from a fight than start one. It's hard to take him seriously as a threat when he's practically jumping at his own shadow. I will place Captain Smek in E tier, and the reason is he's an alien villain who's basically just an incompetent boss. His big evil plan? Running away from danger and making the dumbest decisions possible. Honestly, if he had a real job, he'd be the worst manager in the universe. Alright, so we've covered Sony Animation's Rogues Gallery. From the ridiculous to the impressive, each villain brings their own flavor to the table. Next time you're watching a Sony animated movie, keep an eye on the bad guy. You might catch something clever you missed before. What's your take on these animated antagonists? Which one do you think deserves another shot at causing chaos? Or maybe you've got a theory about a hidden motive we didn't cover. Share your thoughts in the comments. We love a good villain debate. Who knows, we might see some of these baddies pop up again. After all, in animation, even the most defeated villain can always make a comeback. Stay tuned for more animated adventures.